Jasmine Taylor's trembling finger hovered over the "End Call" button. On the other end, FAA Director Anthony Harris sat in stunned silence. "I'll be on the next flight to Atlanta," he finally said. The recording she'd just played would end more than one career at Horizon Airlines. Before I dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more stories about ordinary people standing up against injustice. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next in this incredible journey from discrimination to justice. 12-year-old Zara Taylor couldn't contain her excitement as she boarded Horizon Airlines flight HA-1423 from Chicago to Atlanta. Her mother, Jasmine, had surprised her with first-class tickets as a special birthday treat. It was Zara's first time flying in the premium cabin, and her eyes widened as she took in the spacious seats and elegant surroundings. "Mom, look at these seats. They're so big," Zara whispered, her fingers tracing the soft leather armrest. Jasmine smiled, grateful she could provide this experience for her daughter. The first-class tickets had been a splurge, but seeing Zara's joy made it worthwhile. They were traveling to visit Jasmine's mother, who was recovering from hip surgery. The past few months had been challenging for their family, and Jasmine hoped this trip would bring some much-needed comfort to both her mother and Zara. As they settled into their seats, Jasmine noticed the flight attendant, a blonde woman whose name tag read Bethany Wilson, watching them with narrowed eyes. When Bethany approached, her smile seemed forced. "Excuse me, may I see your boarding passes again?" Bethany asked, her tone clipped. Jasmine pulled up their mobile boarding passes. "Here you go." Bethany scrutinized the passes longer than necessary. "These seats are first class," she stated flatly. "Yes, I'm aware," Jasmine replied, maintaining her composure. "It's my daughter's birthday." Bethany handed the phone back without a word and moved on to welcome other passengers with considerably more warmth. Jasmine exchanged glances with Zara, who seemed confused by the interaction. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart," Jasmine whispered. "Let's enjoy our flight." The plane took off smoothly, and the first part of the journey proceeded without incident. Zara was thrilled with the premium meal service and the extra attention from most of the cabin crew. However, whenever Bethany came by, her demeanor remained cold and distant. About an hour into the flight, the plane encountered unexpected turbulence. The captain's voice came over the intercom, instructing passengers to remain seated with seatbelts fastened. Zara had just received her apple juice when a particularly strong jolt caused the cup to slip from her hand, spilling liquid across her tray table and onto the carpet. "I'm sorry," Zara gasped, reaching for her napkin. Before Jasmine could help, Bethany rushed over, her face contorted with anger. "Look what you've done," she hissed, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "This is exactly why children shouldn't be in first class. They don't know how to behave properly." Jasmine intervened immediately. It was turbulence. It could have happened to anyone. As if to prove her point, a white businessman across the aisle had also spilled his drink during the turbulence. Bethany was already attending to him with a sympathetic smile. "These things happen, sir. Let me clean that up for you right away," she said warmly, providing him with extra napkins and a fresh drink. The contrast was striking. When she returned to Zara and Jasmine, her face had hardened again. "You'll need to control your child better," Bethany said coldly. "This isn't a playground. People pay good money to fly in this cabin." "We paid good money too," Jasmine responded, struggling to keep her voice steady. "And my daughter did nothing wrong. It was turbulence." Bethany leaned closer, lowering her voice but not enough to prevent nearby passengers from hearing. "Listen, I don't know how you got these seats, but in first class, we expect certain standards. Maybe next time, the main cabin would be more appropriate for you." The implication was clear, and Jasmine felt her cheeks burn with anger and humiliation. Zara's eyes filled with tears as she frantically tried to clean up the spill with her small napkin. Are you implying we don't belong here because we're black? Jasmine asked directly. Bethany's expression flickered with alarm before she composed herself. I never said anything about race. Don't make this into something it's not. I'm simply enforcing our standards. From the corner of her eye, Jasmine noticed other crew members exchanging uncomfortable glances but saying nothing. A white couple seated nearby watched the interaction with concerned expressions. If you can't control the situation, I'll have to speak to the captain about having you removed at our destination, Bethany threatened, her voice rising again. This type of behavior disrupts the experience for our regular first-class passengers. Zara began to cry silently, her shoulders shaking with each breath. The joy that had illuminated her face earlier was completely gone, replaced by shame and confusion. Mom, I want to go home, she whispered. Jasmine put her arm around Zara, pulling her close. It's okay, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Across the aisle, a middle-aged white man in a business suit had been watching the entire exchange. He caught Jasmine's eye and subtly held up his phone, indicating he was recording the incident. Jasmine gave him a slight nod of acknowledgement. For the remainder of the flight, Bethany made a point of checking on every first-class passenger except Jasmine and Zara. When she distributed warm cookies, she skipped their row entirely. When Zara asked to use the bathroom, Bethany pointed toward the economy-class lavatory despite the first-class one being unoccupied. The captain's voice interrupted the tense atmosphere, announcing their descent into Atlanta. Passengers began preparing for landing, stowing their items and returning seats to upright positions. Bethany moved through the cabin, checking compliance with landing procedures. When she reached Jasmine and Zara, she paused. I'll be watching you during deplaning, she said quietly. Any further disruptions, and I will have security meet the aircraft. Jasmine stared straight ahead, refusing to give Bethany the satisfaction of seeing how deeply her words cut. Beside her, Zara sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the excitement of flying in first class completely extinguished. The man across the aisle caught Jasmine's attention again and mouthed, I got it all. In that moment, a small flicker of hope kindled in Jasmine's chest. Someone had witnessed their treatment. Someone had evidence. And she would use it to make sure this never happened to another family. The plane touched down in Atlanta with a jarring thud that seemed to punctuate the tension still hanging in the air. As the aircraft taxied to the gate, Jasmine noticed Bethany Wilson whispering to another flight attendant while glancing in their direction. When the seatbelt sign finally turned off and passengers began to stand, Jasmine reached for their carry-on bags in the overhead compartment. Please remain seated, Bethany announced, appearing suddenly at their row. First-class deplaning is conducted in an orderly fashion. You'll need to wait. Jasmine observed as every other first-class passenger was permitted to gather their belongings and exit. Only when the cabin was nearly empty did Bethany step aside with a tight smile. You may proceed now, she said, her tone dripping with false courtesy. As Jasmine and Zara made their way toward the exit, the man who had been recording approached them in the jet bridge. Excuse me, he said, extending his hand. Dr. Samuel Peterson. What happened to you and your daughter in there was unacceptable. Thank you for noticing, Jasmine replied, her voice thick with emotion. I'm Jasmine Taylor, and this is my daughter, Zara. Dr. Peterson pulled out a business card. I recorded most of the interaction. I'd be happy to send you the video and serve as a witness if needed. No one should be treated that way, especially not a child. Jasmine accepted his card gratefully. That would be incredibly helpful. I fly this route frequently for medical conferences, Dr. Peterson continued. I've never seen that flight attendant behave so inappropriately. The airline needs to know. They exchanged contact information, and Dr. Peterson promised to email the video footage that evening. As he walked away, Jasmine noticed Bethany watching from the aircraft door, her eyes cold. Mom, why was she so mean to us? Zara asked as they walked through the terminal, her voice small and wounded. Jasmine struggled to find the right words. How do you explain discrimination to a 12-year-old without crushing her spirit? Some people judge others based on how they look instead of who they are, she finally said. But that's about their own issues, not about you. You did absolutely nothing wrong today. Zara fell silent, processing this information as they made their way to baggage claim. When they reached the carousel, they waited for their checked suitcases. After most passengers had claimed their luggage and departed, Jasmine spotted their bags coming around the belt. Immediately, she noticed something wrong. "Mom, my suitcase." Zara gasped. Zara's bright purple suitcase had a large tear along one side, and the zipper appeared to have been forced open. Jasmine's black hardshell case had deep scratches across its surface. When they opened their luggage to assess the damage, Jasmine discovered several items missing from her bag, including a pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. "This can't be a coincidence," Jasmine muttered, anger replacing her earlier exhaustion. They located the baggage service office and explained the situation to a disinterested agent who filled out a damage report with obvious reluctance. When Jasmine mentioned the incident on the plane and suggested the damage might be connected, the agent's expression hardened. "Ma'am, baggage handlers don't have access to passenger information or cabin disputes. You're making a serious accusation without evidence." As they left the office with their damaged luggage and a claim number they were told probably wouldn't amount to much, they encountered an airport security officer. Jasmine approached him, hoping for assistance. "Excuse me, officer," she began, reading his name badge, "Officer Donovan, we've experienced some concerning issues on our flight and with our baggage. I believe we may have been targeted." Officer Kyle Donovan barely glanced at their damaged luggage. "File a claim with the airline," he said dismissively. "Airport security doesn't handle baggage disputes." "It's more than that," Jasmine persisted. "My daughter and I were harassed by a flight attendant, and now our luggage has been tampered with. I'm concerned this was racially motivated." Officer Donovan's expression changed, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Ma'am, you're making a serious allegation. Do you have any proof this was racially motivated? Because from where I stand, it sounds like you had a bad flight and some rough baggage handling. Happens to everyone." Zara tugged at Jasmine's sleeve, whispering, "Mom, let's just go. Please." The defeat in her daughter's voice broke Jasmine's heart. Normally confident and outspoken, Zara now seemed withdrawn and anxious, wanting only to escape the situation. "Thank you for your time, officer," Jasmine said stiffly, guiding Zara toward the exit. They took a rideshare to Jasmine's mother's house in the suburbs of Atlanta. During the 30-minute drive, Zara remained unusually quiet, staring out the window at the passing scenery. Jasmine tried to engage her in conversation about her upcoming week with Grandma, but Zara's responses were monosyllabic. When they arrived at the modest single-story home, Jasmine's mother, Patricia, was waiting on the porch. Despite her recent surgery, she had insisted on greeting them outside. Her smile faltered when she saw their expressions. "What happened?" Patricia asked, hugging Zara close. "We'll talk about it later," Jasmine murmured, nodding toward Zara. After settling in and having a light dinner, Zara asked to lie down, complaining of a headache. Once she was in the guest room, Jasmine recounted the day's events to her mother. Patricia listened in silence, her face growing increasingly troubled. When Jasmine finished, Patricia shook her head sadly. "Some things haven't changed as much as we'd like to believe," she said quietly. "I remember when I was about Zara's age, my mother and I weren't allowed to sit at certain lunch counters. Different time, different setting, same message, you don't belong here. I can't believe she has to experience this," Jasmine said, her voice breaking. "I hoped things would be better for her generation." "They are better in some ways," Patricia acknowledged. "But there's still work to do. The difference now is that you have options we didn't have back then. You have evidence. You have witnesses. You can fight this." Later that evening, Jasmine checked on Zara and found her awake, staring at the ceiling. "Can't sleep?" Jasmine asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Mom," Zara said hesitantly, "that lady thought we stole those seats, didn't she? She thought we couldn't afford to be there." The perceptiveness of her daughter's observation stunned Jasmine. "Yes, I think that's part of it. Grandma told me stories about when she was little," Zara continued. "About signs and rules about where black people could go. Is that still happening? Just without the signs?" Jasmine took a deep breath. "Sometimes, yes. Some people still carry those old beliefs. But here's the difference, your grandma couldn't fight back then. We can fight now." "How?" Zara asked. "I'm going to call the airline tomorrow," Jasmine explained. "Dr. Peterson is sending us the video. We're going to make sure Bethany Wilson and Horizon Airlines understand that what happened today was wrong." After Zara finally fell asleep, Jasmine stayed up late researching passenger rights and airline complaint procedures. She found Horizon's customer service number and prepared to call first thing in the morning. As she drafted notes for her complaint, an email notification appeared on her phone. Dr. Peterson had sent the video footage as promised, along with a message offering his full support. Watching the video, Jasmine was struck by how clearly it captured Bethany's hostility. The contrast between her treatment of Zara and the white businessman who had also spilled his drink was undeniable. Jasmine felt a renewed determination as she prepared for the battle ahead. The next morning, Jasmine called Horizon Airlines customer service line. After navigating an extensive automated system and waiting on hold for 45 minutes, she finally reached a representative named Thomas Green. "I want to file a formal complaint about discriminatory treatment on yesterday's flight HA-1423 from Chicago to Atlanta," Jasmine explained, keeping her voice steady. "I'm sorry to hear you had a negative experience," Thomas replied in a tone that suggested he was reading from a script. "Can you describe the issue?" Jasmine detailed the events, emphasizing the disparate treatment and Bethany's threats. "I understand your frustration," Thomas said when she finished. "Sometimes flight attendants have to make quick decisions in the interest of cabin safety. This wasn't about safety," Jasmine insisted. "My daughter spilled a drink during turbulence. Another passenger did the same thing and was treated completely differently. Without being there, it's difficult for me to assess the situation," Thomas responded. "I can certainly log your complaint, but I should inform you that our flight attendants undergo extensive training in customer service and non-discrimination policies." "I have video evidence," Jasmine countered. There was a pause on the line. "You recorded our flight crew?" Another passenger recorded the interaction because he was so disturbed by what he witnessed. "I see," Thomas said, his tone shifting slightly. "I'll escalate this to our customer relations team. They'll contact you within 3 to 5 business days." As Jasmine hung up, she couldn't shake the feeling that her complaint would be buried in bureaucracy. She turned to find Patricia standing in the doorway, leaning on her walker. "You know they're going to try to make this go away quietly," Patricia said. "Companies like that always do." "Then we'll make noise," Jasmine replied, a plan already forming in her mind. The following morning, Jasmine received an email from Horizon Airlines Customer Relations Department. The message expressed regret for any misunderstanding and offered a $100 flight voucher as a gesture of goodwill. There was no acknowledgement of discrimination or inappropriate behavior, just vague references to service that did not meet expectations. $100, Jasmine said incredulously, showing the email to her mother. "That's what they think this is worth." Patricia shook her head. "They're hoping you'll take it and go away." Jasmine immediately drafted a response, declining the voucher and reiterating the seriousness of the incident. She attached Dr. Peterson's video and requested a formal investigation into Bethany Wilson's conduct. She also asked for information about Horizon's non-discrimination policies and training procedures. While waiting for a response, Jasmine contacted the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She spoke with a reporter named Linda Murray, providing details of the incident and offering to share the video evidence. "I appreciate you bringing this to our attention," Linda said, her voice professional but distant. "We receive many complaints about airline service, though. What makes this one newsworthy?" "This wasn't about bad service," Jasmine explained. "This was about a child being humiliated because of her race." "That's a strong accusation," Linda replied cautiously. "Would you be comfortable if we reached out to Horizon for their side of the story?" "Absolutely," Jasmine confirmed. "I have nothing to hide." Despite Linda's promise to look into it, Jasmine sensed the reporter's reluctance. When she hadn't heard back after 2 days, she called again only to be told Linda was still researching the story. Meanwhile, Zara's anxiety about their return flight grew. She had nightmares about being removed from the plane by security officers. During the day, she stuck close to her grandmother, showing little interest in going out or seeing friends in the neighborhood. "I don't want to fly back," Zara admitted one evening. "Can we take a bus instead?" "Oh, sweetheart," Jasmine said, pulling her daughter into a hug. "We can't let one bad experience take away our right to travel how we choose. We have just as much right to be on that plane as anyone else." Zara didn't seem convinced, but she nodded bravely. Searching for additional support, Jasmine contacted the African American Travelers Association, a nationwide organization that advocated for equal treatment in the travel industry. She spoke with a representative named Imani Johnson, who listened attentively to her story. "Unfortunately, what you're describing isn't uncommon," Imani said. "We receive similar reports weekly, though few have the video evidence you do. Would you allow me to connect you with an attorney who specializes in these cases?" That afternoon, Jasmine spoke with Michael Washington, a civil rights attorney who had successfully represented several discrimination cases against airlines and hotels. "The video is compelling," Washington acknowledged after viewing the footage. "But these cases are still challenging. Airlines have significant legal resources, and they often argue that service decisions are based on behavior, not race. The video clearly shows identical situations with different responses," Jasmine pointed out. "Yes, and that helps," Washington agreed. "But be prepared for a fight. They'll likely offer an increased settlement with a non-disclosure agreement. You'll need to decide if you want financial compensation or public accountability." "I want changes made so this doesn't happen to other families," Jasmine said firmly. Washington promised to review the case further and get back to her with a proposed strategy. In the meantime, Jasmine received a troubling call from Dr. Peterson. "Horizon's legal team contacted me," he explained, his voice tense. "They're offering to license my video for $5,000. It feels like they're trying to buy my silence. Are you considering it?" Jasmine asked, her heart sinking. "Absolutely not," Dr. Peterson said firmly. "What I witnessed was wrong, and I won't be part of covering it up. I just wanted you to know they're actively trying to contain this." After hanging up, Jasmine spent the evening researching Bethany Wilson online. On employee review sites and social media, she discovered multiple complaints from passengers of color who had encountered the flight attendant. Several described experiences similar to Zara's, though none had documented evidence. One post from 18 months earlier caught Jasmine's attention: "Flew first-class Chi to ATL. Flight attendant beat Wilson treated my family like we didn't belong there. Questioned our tickets twice. Ignored us during service. At Horizon Air did nothing when we complained." Jasmine took screenshots of every mention of Bethany Wilson she could find, creating a file of evidence suggesting a pattern of behavior rather than an isolated incident. She forwarded this information to Attorney Washington, who responded with interest. "This strengthens our case considerably," he wrote. "It suggests Horizon was aware of a problem employee and failed to address it. Keep gathering information." 5 days after submitting her formal complaint, Jasmine still hadn't received a substantive response from Horizon beyond the initial voucher offer. She decided to escalate the matter by posting the video on social media with a detailed account of their experience. Within hours, it had been viewed and shared thousands of times, with comments flooding in from people who had experienced similar treatment. The following morning, Jasmine's phone rang with a call from an unknown number. When she answered, the woman on the other end introduced herself as Victoria Adams, Vice President of Customer Relations at Horizon Airlines. Ms. Taylor, Victoria began, her voice polished and controlled, "I'm reaching out regarding the incident on flight HA-1423. We take these matters very seriously and would like to resolve this situation to your satisfaction." Jasmine had been waiting for this call. The social media pressure had finally broken through the corporate shield. Now, the real battle would begin. Ms. Taylor, "I've reviewed the incident personally," Victoria Adams said, her voice carrying the practiced calm of someone trained to defuse public relations crises. "I want to assure you that Horizon Airlines does not tolerate discrimination of any kind." Jasmine sat at her mother's kitchen table, phone pressed to her ear, taking careful notes. "Yet it happened on your aircraft, by your employee, and your initial response was a $100 voucher." There was a brief pause before Victoria continued. "We acknowledge that the situation could have been handled better. To demonstrate our commitment to making this right, I'm authorized to offer you a settlement of $5,000. $5,000, Jasmine repeated, making sure her mother could hear. Patricia, who was preparing lunch nearby, raised her eyebrows. "Yes," Victoria confirmed. "In exchange, we would ask you to sign a standard non-disclosure agreement and remove the video from social media platforms." Now the real agenda was clear. "So you want to pay me to be quiet," Jasmine stated flatly. "Ms. Taylor, this is a generous offer that acknowledges your negative experience while allowing all parties to move forward," Victoria explained, her tone cooling slightly. "Many of our passengers would be quite satisfied with this resolution." "I'm not interested in being paid off," Jasmine replied firmly. "I want accountability. I want to know what disciplinary action will be taken against Bethany Wilson. I want to see changes in your training and policies to ensure this doesn't happen to other families." Victoria's response was immediate and practiced. "We cannot discuss personnel matters with third parties, Ms. Taylor. I can assure you the incident will be addressed internally according to our procedures." "That's not good enough," Jasmine insisted. "This isn't an isolated incident. Bethany Wilson has a history of similar behavior that your company has ignored." "Ms. Taylor," Victoria's voice took on an edge, "I understand you're upset, but I think you may be making this more racial than it actually was. Flight attendants deal with difficult passengers every day. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding about what constitutes appropriate behavior in first class." The implication was clear, and Jasmine felt her anger rising. "My 12-year-old daughter spilled a drink during turbulence. A white passenger did the same thing and received entirely different treatment. The video shows this clearly. How is that a misunderstanding? Videos can be misleading without context," Victoria countered smoothly. "Our offer stands. $5,000, with the NDA. I should mention that pursuing this further could involve lengthy legal proceedings with uncertain outcomes." "I'll get back to you," Jasmine said coldly, ending the call. Patricia placed a sandwich in front of her daughter. "They're scared," she observed. "That video must be even more damning than we thought." "They should be scared," Jasmine replied, her determination hardening. "Because I'm not going away." That evening, while browsing social media responses to her post, Jasmine discovered she wasn't alone. Dozens of black passengers had shared similar experiences on Horizon flights, many specifically mentioning Bethany Wilson. One comment caught her attention: created a support group for airline discrimination victims. DM if you want to join. Jasmine messaged the account, and within hours, she was added to a private group called Justice in the Skies. The group had over 300 members, all sharing stories of discrimination on various airlines. With their encouragement, Jasmine created a specific hashtag for Horizon incidents, #Horizon discrimination. The hashtag gained traction quickly, with new stories emerging hourly. Jasmine organized the accounts, noting patterns and collecting contact information from willing participants. What had begun as a personal quest for justice was evolving into a movement. 3 days after declining Victoria's offer, Jasmine received an anonymous email. "Be careful. Horizon protects their own. They'll come after you and your daughter." Though disturbed by the message, Jasmine refused to be intimidated. She forwarded the email to Attorney Washington, who advised her to document any further threats. Through her research with the Justice in the Skies group, Jasmine uncovered a troubling pattern. Horizon Airlines had faced at least 12 discrimination complaints in the past 5 years, all settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. Former employees in the group revealed that the company's diversity training was perfunctory at best, with little accountability for staff who violated policies. Have you ever experienced unfair treatment just because of who you are? Type 1 in the comments if you've ever been discriminated against, or 2 if you've witnessed discrimination and stood up against it. This story about Jasmine and Zara shows how important it is to speak up. While you're at it, hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories like this one. I'm curious, what would you have done if you were in Dr. Peterson's position on that flight? Would you have recorded the incident or stayed silent? Let me know in the comments. Now, as Jasmine digs deeper into Horizon Airlines practices, what do you think she'll discover? Is Bethany Wilson just one bad employee, or is there a deeper problem within the company's culture? The corporate response suggests they're hiding something bigger, but what could it be? Let's find out as our story continues. A week into their stay in Atlanta, Zara's grandmother suggested she attend an art therapy program at the local community center. Initially reluctant, Zara finally agreed after gentle encouragement from both her mother and grandmother. "It might help to express what you're feeling," Patricia said, sharing her own experience with art therapy after her husband's passing. On the third day of the program, the art teacher, Alicia Fernandez, assigned a project about personal challenges. While other children created artwork about school pressures or family changes, Zara quietly worked on a striking piece depicting a dark-haired girl standing alone in an airplane aisle, surrounded by shadowy figures with exaggerated sneering expressions. One figure, clearly the flight attendant, loomed larger than the others, her mouth open in a shout represented by jagged black lines. Ms. Fernandez observed Zara's work with concern. When the class ended, she gently asked Zara about the painting. "It's what happened on our flight here," Zara explained softly, describing the incident in halting sentences. That evening, Alicia called her brother, Julian Fernandez, a producer at WSB-TV, Atlanta's ABC affiliate. "Jules, there's a story you need to hear," she began, describing Zara's artwork and the incident behind it. "The girl's mother has been fighting for accountability, but no one's listening." Julian's interest was immediately piqued. "Can you introduce me? This sounds like exactly the kind of story we should be covering." The following day, Jasmine received a call from Julian Fernandez, explaining how he'd learned about their experience. Unlike Linda Murray from the newspaper, Julian seemed genuinely concerned and eager to investigate. "We'd like to interview you and, if she's comfortable, Zara," Julian explained. "We're also interested in exploring whether this is part of a pattern at Horizon Airlines." Jasmine consulted with Attorney Washington, who advised that media coverage could help pressure Horizon but cautioned about potential backlash. After careful consideration and a lengthy discussion with Zara, they agreed to the interview. Meanwhile, Jasmine's work performance was suffering as she devoted increasing time to the fight against Horizon. Her supervisor had called twice to express concern about deadlines and her request to extend her leave. The financial strain was mounting, but Jasmine remained resolute. The day before the scheduled interview, Jasmine received an email from an anonymous Horizon Airlines employee. The message read, "Not all of us are like Bethany. Some of us have been trying to report her for years. Check your spam folder for more information." In her spam folder, Jasmine found an email with an attached document labeled Horizon Internal Complaint, B. Wilson. The document contained a formal complaint filed by a flight attendant named Rachel Cooper 6 months earlier, detailing Bethany's consistent pattern of discriminatory behavior toward passengers of color, particularly in premium cabins. The complaint noted that despite multiple reports, management had taken no significant action. Jasmine immediately forwarded the document to Attorney Washington and Julian Fernandez, the evidence of Horizon's knowledge of the problem strengthening their case considerably. The evening news segment aired 3 days later, featuring interviews with Jasmine and a briefly appeared Zara, whose powerful artwork was displayed prominently. Julian had done his homework, presenting a timeline of similar complaints against Horizon and questioning why the airline had failed to address the pattern. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the story was picked up by national news outlets. Horizon's social media accounts were flooded with messages from outraged viewers, many sharing their own experiences of discrimination on the airline's flights. Dr. Peterson, who had remained supportive throughout, appeared in a follow-up segment, describing what he witnessed and confirming that Horizon had attempted to purchase his silence. His standing as a respected physician lent additional credibility to the story. "I refused their offer because some things are more important than money," he stated firmly on camera. "What happened to Zara Taylor could happen to any child if we don't stand up against discrimination." 2 days after the initial broadcast, Jasmine received another anonymous email, "Check your inbox in 10 minutes. Not all of us support what happened." Exactly 10 minutes later, a new email arrived containing dozens of internal communications from Horizon Airlines regarding discrimination complaints. The email came from a flight attendant named Rachel Cooper, who had finally decided to reveal her identity. "I can't stay silent anymore," Rachel wrote. "I've worked for Horizon for 7 years and watched management ignore or bury these issues repeatedly. Bethany Wilson is protected because her father is a major investor in the airline. I'm risking my job by sending this, but seeing Zara's face on the news. I couldn't sleep knowing I had information that could help." The documents revealed a disturbing pattern. Complaints about discriminatory treatment were routinely classified as customer satisfaction issues, rather than potential civil rights violations, allowing them to be resolved with vouchers or small settlements rather than substantive investigation. Bethany Wilson had been the subject of 17 formal complaints in the past 3 years, yet had received only 1 documented verbal warning. Armed with this new evidence, Attorney Washington filed a formal discrimination complaint with the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Transportation. The complaint named not only Bethany Wilson but also several Horizon executives who had knowingly permitted discriminatory practices to continue. As public pressure mounted, Horizon's stock price began to drop. Investors grew concerned about potential lawsuits and damage to the brand's reputation. The airline issued a carefully worded statement claiming they were investigating the allegations thoroughly and reaffirming their commitment to equal treatment for all passengers. Late one evening, as Jasmine was reviewing the latest batch of documents from Rachel, she received an unexpected call from James Wilson, a representative of the flight attendants union. "Ms. Taylor, I'm calling unofficially," he began cautiously. "There's a faction within our union that wants to support your case. Many of us have tried to address discrimination issues internally without success. Why are you reaching out now?" Jasmine asked. "Your story is gaining traction where others failed," James explained. "And frankly, Bethany Wilson has made many of our jobs harder. She's protected by management, which creates a toxic environment for the rest of us who try to provide professional service to all passengers." James offered to connect Jasmine with other flight attendants willing to provide statements about Horizon's culture and the specific protection afforded to Bethany Wilson. This insider support could prove invaluable in establishing a pattern of institutional discrimination rather than isolated incidents. As Jasmine ended the call, she felt a surge of hope. What had begun as a painful personal experience was evolving into something much larger, a chance for systemic change. Unexpected allies were emerging from all directions, each bringing new pieces to complete the puzzle of accountability. That night, she sat with Zara on the porch swing of her mother's house, watching fireflies illuminate the warm Georgia evening. "Your artwork made a difference," Jasmine told her daughter. "It helped people understand what happened to us." Zara leaned against her mother's shoulder. "Do you think anything will really change?" "Yes," Jasmine said with newfound confidence. "I really do. Sometimes it takes one voice to start a chorus." As if in response to her words, Jasmine's phone began to light up with notifications. The hashtag Horizon Discrimination had gone viral nationally, with celebrities and civil rights organizations joining the conversation. What Horizon had tried to dismiss as a minor customer service issue had become a rallying point for addressing discrimination in the travel industry. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since that fateful flight, Jasmine felt the balance of power shifting. Horizon Airlines would soon discover that the cost of accountability would be far greater than the $5,000 they had offered to buy her silence. Horizon Airlines CEO David Mitchell sat at the head of the conference table, his expression grim as he surveyed the executives gathered for the emergency meeting. The company's stock had dropped 12% in 3 days, and major shareholders were demanding action. "This situation is spiraling out of control," Mitchell declared, tossing a tablet displaying the latest news coverage onto the table. "I want solutions, not excuses." Victoria Adams, VP of Customer Relations, spoke first. "We've engaged Blackwood Crisis Management to help contain the damage. They're developing a comprehensive strategy to shift the narrative." Within 48 hours, Horizon launched an aggressive PR campaign highlighting their diversity initiatives and community investments. Full-page newspaper ads appeared featuring smiling Black employees and passengers, alongside statements about Horizon's long-standing commitment to inclusion. The airline announced a new partnership with several minority-owned businesses and promised enhanced diversity training for all staff. Simultaneously, Jasmine received a certified letter from Horizon's legal team. The document alleged that her social media posts and media interviews contained defamatory statements that mischaracterized the airline's policies and culture. It demanded immediate retraction of specific claims and threatened legal action if she continued to damage the company's reputation with unsubstantiated allegations. Attorney Washington reviewed the letter and recognized the strategy immediately. "This is typical corporate intimidation," he explained to Jasmine. "They're trying to scare you into silence while they reshape public perception." The letter carefully avoids addressing the specific incident with Zara because they know the video evidence is irrefutable. More troubling developments followed. Jasmine's employer, an accounting firm in Chicago, called her into a virtual meeting with the HR director and her immediate supervisor. "Jasmine, we've received some concerning feedback from clients," her supervisor began awkwardly. "Several of our major accounts have connections to Horizon's parent company. They've expressed discomfort with your public activities." "You mean my standing up against discrimination?" Jasmine asked pointedly. The HR director interjected smoothly. "We respect your personal situation, but we need to consider the firm's reputation and client relationships. We're requesting that you keep your professional identity separate from this matter." The implication was clear: either stop the public campaign or risk your job. With her mother's medical bills and Zara to support, the threat carried significant weight. Yet Jasmine refused to back down. "I understand your concerns," she replied carefully. "But this is a matter of principle. My daughter was humiliated because of her race. I can't and won't pretend that didn't happen to protect client relationships." The following day, Jasmine was informed that her extended leave request had been denied, and she was expected to return to Chicago immediately or face employment consequences. The timing couldn't have been worse. Zara was still struggling with anxiety about the return flight, and Patricia's recovery was progressing slower than expected. As Jasmine grappled with these professional pressures, a new and more personal attack emerged. An anonymous source leaked information about Jasmine's past to several right-wing media outlets. Articles appeared online questioning her character based on a decade-old incident from college, a protest arrest that had been expunged from her record. Other pieces implied she was a professional grievance filer, seeking financial gain. The source of the leak became apparent when Victoria Adams called again, her tone artificially sympathetic. "Ms. Taylor, these new revelations must be distressing for you and your daughter. Perhaps now would be a good time to reconsider our settlement offer. We could increase it to $15,000, provided you sign the NDA immediately." Jasmine's response was ice cold. "You just confirmed Horizon is behind the character assassination. Thank you for that admission. I'll be sure my attorney adds it to our filing." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "That's not what we both know exactly what's happening," Jasmine interrupted. "Tell your crisis management team they've just strengthened my case." Despite her brave front, the personal attacks took a toll. Zara faced bullying at the community center when children of Horizon employees repeated things they'd overheard at home. "My dad says your mom is just trying to get famous and make money," one child told her cruelly. Dr. Peterson was not spared either. The hospital where he worked received anonymous complaints about his professional conduct, triggering a review by the ethics board. Though the allegations were vague and ultimately dismissed, the process was stressful and time-consuming. Most concerning was the fate of Rachel Cooper, the flight attendant who had provided internal documents. Horizon suspended her for unrelated violations of company policy, claiming she had improperly documented sick leave 3 months earlier. The message to other potential whistleblowers was unmistakable. As these counterattacks intensified, Jasmine gathered her growing network of allies for a strategy session. Attorney Washington, Julian Fernandez from WSB-TV, Imani Johnson from the African American Travelers Association, Rachel Cooper, despite her suspension, and James Wilson from the Flight Attendants Union joined a secure video call to assess their position. "Horizon is playing hardball because they're truly frightened," Washington observed. "Their internal documents show at least 27 discrimination incidents in premium cabins that were settled with NDAs. If those all come to light, the liability could be enormous. They're also worried about federal contracts," Imani added. Horizon has lucrative government transportation agreements that require compliance with anti-discrimination laws. Proven patterns of discrimination could jeopardize those contracts. Julian Fernandez shared media insights. "Their PR campaign isn't working as well as they hoped. The contrast between their diversity ads and the viral video of Zara's treatment feels cynical to viewers. We need to keep the focus on the systemic issues, not just one incident." Rachel Cooper, speaking from her apartment where she'd been confined since her suspension, provided critical information. "There's a board meeting next Tuesday. I have contacts who say several directors are questioning Mitchell's handling of this situation. The stock drop has them nervous." James Wilson offered union perspective. "Most flight attendants are horrified by how Zara was treated. Bethany Wilson has been a divisive figure for years, but management protected her because of her connections. This could be our chance to address broader workplace culture issues." By the end of the meeting, a clear strategy had emerged. Rather than being distracted by Horizon's personal attacks, they would escalate to federal regulatory involvement. The Department of Transportation had authority to investigate discrimination complaints against airlines, and the growing evidence suggested potential violations of civil rights statutes. As Jasmine ended the call, she received a text message from an unknown number. "Check public records for Terrence Williams vs. Horizon Airlines, filed 2023, settled March 2024. He has what you need." The anonymous tip led to a breakthrough. Terrence Williams had been a Horizon HR manager who filed a wrongful termination lawsuit after being fired for insubordination. Court documents showed his insubordination consisted of repeatedly flagging discrimination complaints for proper investigation rather than routine settlement. Though the case had been settled with, predictably, a non-disclosure agreement, the initial filing contained references to internal documents that could prove crucial to Jasmine's case. Attorney Washington immediately filed motions to access these sealed records based on their relevance to an ongoing federal investigation. The corporate counterattack had been fierce, but it had also revealed Horizon's vulnerabilities and desperation. As Jasmine told Zara that evening, sometimes when people push back really hard, it's because they know they're in the wrong. For the first time, Jasmine began to believe that real accountability might be possible. Not just for Bethany Wilson, but for the corporate culture that had protected and enabled her behavior for years. Terrence Williams lived in a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of Atlanta. When Jasmine and Attorney Washington arrived for their scheduled meeting, they found a man whose cautious demeanor betrayed the stress of his legal battles with Horizon Airlines. "I've been following your story," Terrence said after inviting them inside. "What happened to your daughter is exactly the kind of incident I tried to address before they fired me." As Horizon's former diversity and inclusion manager, Terrence had unique insight into the company's handling of discrimination complaints. Despite his title, he explained, his role had been largely ceremonial until he began taking it seriously. "The position was created to check a box for government contracts," he explained. "I was supposed to organize cultural sensitivity workshops and write nice reports about our progress. When I actually started investigating complaints and recommending disciplinary action, things changed quickly." Terrence walked to his home office and returned with a flash drive. "I shouldn't have these documents," he admitted. "Legally, I was required to return or destroy everything as part of my settlement. But some things are more important than legal agreements." The flash drive contained a treasure trove of internal communications, including emails between executives discussing how to manage discrimination complaints to minimize liability and avoid public relations problems. Most damning were statistical reports showing that complaints from passengers of color were systematically categorized differently than similar complaints from white passengers, resulting in lower compensation and less thorough investigation. "This is why they paid me to go away," Terrence explained. "These documents establish a pattern of institutional discrimination, not just individual bad actors." Attorney Washington reviewed the files with growing excitement. "This changes everything," he said. "We now have evidence of systemic discrimination at the corporate policy level." Equally important were personnel files showing that Bethany Wilson had been the subject of numerous complaints, yet had received promotions and premium route assignments despite documented issues. Notes from her supervisor acknowledged her customer service challenges with certain demographics, but praised her excellent rapport with our high-value frequent flyers. "They knew," Jasmine said quietly, anger building in her voice. "They knew exactly what she was doing, and they not only allowed it, they rewarded it." Terrence nodded grimly. "The culture at Horizon values certain passengers over others. Flight attendants quickly learn which passengers they need to please and which they can mistreat without consequences." Armed with this new evidence, Attorney Washington recommended escalating their complaint to the Federal Aviation Administration. While the Department of Transportation handled most consumer complaints against airlines, the FAA had broader regulatory authority and could investigate issues affecting airline certification. "The key is finding the right person within the agency," Washington explained. "Someone with both the authority and the motivation to take this seriously." Jasmine spent the next several days researching the FAA's leadership structure. During her research, she discovered that the current FAA Director, Anthony Harris, had an interesting background. Before his appointment, Harris had served as a transportation policy advisor with a focus on equity issues. More intriguingly, his father had been involved in the civil rights movement, specifically working to desegregate interstate bus transportation in the 1960s. He might understand the historical context of transportation discrimination in a way others wouldn't, Jasmine told Washington. "If we could get this evidence directly to him, it might make a difference." Reaching a high-level federal official proved challenging. Jasmine's initial calls to the FAA were redirected to various departments, each explaining they weren't the appropriate channel for her complaint. Consumer Affairs directed her to Civil Rights Compliance, which suggested she contact the DOT's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection instead. Undeterred, Jasmine leveraged every connection in her growing network. Imani Johnson from the African American Travelers Association knew a former FAA employee who provided insights on internal procedures and reporting structures. Dr. Peterson had a colleague whose brother worked in the FAA's Atlanta office. Each connection brought Jasmine one step closer to reaching Director Harris. After 2 weeks of persistent networking and countless phone calls, Jasmine finally received contact information for Denise Richards, Director Harris's executive assistant. According to her source, Richards was the gatekeeper who determined which issues reached the director's attention. Jasmine called the direct line, heart pounding as the phone rang. Director Harris's office, "This is Denise," a crisp, professional voice answered. "Ms. Richards, my name is Jasmine Taylor," she began, launching into the carefully prepared explanation of why her case merited the director's attention. "Ms. Taylor," Richards interrupted politely but firmly, "while I sympathize with your situation, the director's schedule is extremely full with regulatory and safety matters. There are established channels for discrimination complaints, which I'd be happy to." "Please," Jasmine interjected, abandoning her script. "My 12-year-old daughter was humiliated because of her race on a Horizon Airlines flight. We have evidence that this is part of a pattern the airline has deliberately concealed. All I'm asking for is 5 minutes of Director Harris's time." There was a brief silence before Richards replied. "Send me your evidence package. I'll review it personally. I can't promise the director will see it, but I'll give it fair consideration." Jasmine and Attorney Washington spent the next 24 hours compiling a comprehensive briefing document. They included Dr. Peterson's video, Terrence Williams' internal records, Rachel Cooper's communications, testimonials from other passengers, and a detailed timeline showing Horizon's response and subsequent attempts to silence critics. The package concluded with a clear analysis of how these practices potentially violated federal regulations. 3 days after submitting the package, Jasmine's phone rang. The caller ID displayed a Washington, D.C. area code. "Ms. Taylor? This is Denise Richards from Director Harris's office. He's reviewed your materials and would like to speak with you tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. Can you be available for a call at that time?" The breakthrough they had been fighting for was finally within reach. As Jasmine shared the news with her allies, a renewed sense of hope spread through the group. For the first time, someone with real regulatory power would hear their case. What they didn't know was that Denise Richards had a personal reason for ensuring the director saw their evidence. 20 years earlier, her own mother had experienced similar discrimination on a flight, with no recourse or acknowledgement. Some battles are fought not just for ourselves, but for those who came before us and those who will come after. At precisely 2 p.m. Eastern, Jasmine's phone rang. She had prepared extensively for this moment, rehearsing key points and organizing her thoughts to make the most of whatever time Director Harris might spare. "Ms. Taylor, Anthony Harris here." The voice was deep and measured, with the practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to high-stakes conversations. "Director Harris, thank you for taking my call," Jasmine replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've reviewed the materials you provided," Harris continued. "I had planned to give you 5 minutes today, but after seeing the evidence, I've cleared 30 minutes on my calendar. That said, I should inform you that as FAA Director, my primary jurisdiction covers aviation safety and operations. Discrimination complaints typically fall under the Department of Transportation's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection." "I understand, sir," Jasmine acknowledged. "But this isn't just about one incident or one employee. The documents we've provided show systematic practices that potentially impact safety culture and regulatory compliance." "That's what caught my attention," Harris admitted. "Start from the beginning. Tell me what happened to your daughter." Jasmine recounted Zara's experience, describing not just the specifics of Bethany Wilson's behavior but also the emotional impact on her daughter. She explained how their initial complaint had been dismissed, the escalating attempts to silence them, and the pattern of similar incidents they had uncovered. "The video was particularly disturbing," Harris commented. The contrast in how the flight attendant responded to identical situations based solely on the passenger's race was unmistakable. Encouraged by his engagement, Jasmine continued, detailing Terrence Williams' evidence of institutional discrimination and the airline's aggressive efforts to prevent this information from becoming public. "What concerns me from a regulatory perspective," Harris said, "is the potential connection between this discriminatory culture and overall safety practices. Airlines that systematically ignore certain types of complaints may be creating environments where other issues go unreported as well." "That's exactly our concern," Jasmine agreed. "If flight attendants are trained to treat certain passengers differently, what other corporate policies might be compromising safety or compliance?" Their scheduled 30-minute call extended to nearly an hour as Director Harris asked detailed questions about specific documents and testimonies. As they were concluding, Harris's tone became more personal. "Ms. Taylor, I don't typically share this in professional contexts, but your daughter's experience resonated with me. My own daughter experienced a similar incident on a different airline several years ago. She was 16 at the time, flying alone to visit her grandparents. Jasmine hadn't expected this revelation. I'm sorry that happened to her. It affected her deeply," Harris continued. "She stopped wanting to fly, which was difficult given our family's geographical spread. But what bothered me most was the airline's response, or lack thereof. As a father, I felt powerless despite my legal background and connections. That's exactly how I felt throughout this process," Jasmine admitted. "The difference is that you didn't accept that powerlessness," Harris observed. "You fought not just for your daughter but for accountability that could help many others." After a brief pause, Harris made a decision. "I'm initiating a formal investigation into Horizon Airlines' compliance with federal aviation regulations, with particular attention to their training procedures, complaint handling processes, and corporate culture as it relates to passenger safety and equal treatment." Jasmine could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Thank you, Director Harris. Don't thank me yet," he cautioned. "This will be a thorough but fair process. Horizon will have opportunities to respond, and the investigation may take months. That said, I'll be on the next flight to Atlanta to meet with you and review the original evidence personally." As they concluded the call, Jasmine's finger hovered over the "end call" button. The journey from that humiliating moment on the plane to this potential turning point had been arduous, but for the first time, she felt the full weight of institutional power aligning with justice rather than against it. What neither Jasmine nor Director Harris knew was that their conversation had not been entirely private. Through connections within the FAA, Horizon executives had been alerted to the scheduled call and had employed questionable means to monitor it. Within minutes of the call ending, Horizon CEO David Mitchell received a full briefing on its contents. Mitchell immediately called an emergency meeting with his executive team. "Harris is coming to Atlanta," he announced grimly. "He's initiating a formal investigation that could expose everything, not just the Wilson incident, but our entire complaint management system." Victoria Adams paled visibly. "If they access all our records." "Exactly," Mitchell cut her off. "Get legal on this immediately. Find any procedural grounds to challenge the scope of their investigation. And get me Jasmine Taylor's number, I'll handle this personally." That evening, as Jasmine was sharing the news of Harris's support with her mother and Zara, her phone rang again. The caller ID showed Horizon Airlines executive offices. "Ms. Taylor, this is David Mitchell, CEO of Horizon Airlines." The voice was smooth, practiced in the art of corporate diplomacy. "I've just been briefed on some developments and wanted to reach out directly." "Mr. Mitchell," Jasmine replied coolly, "I'm surprised to hear from you at this stage." "I believe in addressing problems at the highest level," Mitchell said. "I understand you've been in contact with the FAA regarding your experience on one of our flights. I want you to know that I take these matters extremely seriously. Seriously enough to ignore them until federal regulators became involved." Jasmine couldn't keep the edge from her voice. Mitchell chuckled, a practiced sound designed to diffuse tension. "I deserve that. Communication breakdowns happen in large organizations, which is why I'm personally offering to make this right. We're prepared to offer you a settlement of $50,000, with no NDA requirements. You would be free to discuss your experience as you see fit. The tenfold increase from their previous offer confirmed to Jasmine just how worried they had become. This isn't about money, Mr. Mitchell. Of course not, Mitchell agreed smoothly. Which is why we're also committing to a complete review of our training procedures and complaint handling processes. We'd welcome your input as part of a passenger advisory committee. When Jasmine didn't immediately respond, Mitchell's tone subtly shifted. Ms. Taylor, I respect your advocacy, but I feel I should point out that federal investigations can be lengthy, contentious processes with uncertain outcomes. Director Harris has exceeded his authority by involving the FAA in what is clearly a customer service matter. His personal connection to the issue represents a conflict of interest that would likely result in the investigation being reassigned. The implied threat was clear. Are you saying you have influence over FAA personnel decisions? Jasmine asked directly. I'm simply stating facts about regulatory processes, Mitchell replied, though his meaning remained unmistakable. The aviation industry and regulatory bodies maintain necessary professional relationships. Pursuing this path could result in years of litigation with no meaningful changes, whereas accepting our offer provides immediate compensation and a seat at the table for real policy discussions. I'll consider your offer and discuss it with my attorney, Jasmine said, unwilling to commit while feeling pressured. I encourage you to do so quickly, Mitchell advised. This offer is time-sensitive given developing circumstances. After ending the call, Jasmine immediately contacted Attorney Washington to report the conversation. He all but admitted they have ways to interfere with Harris's investigation, she explained. And the timing suggests they somehow knew about my call with the director. Washington was deeply concerned. The increased offer without an NDA is telling. They're more worried about regulatory action than public opinion at this point. As for Mitchell's implied threats about influencing the investigation, that could constitute improper interference with a federal regulatory process. The next morning, Director Harris called Jasmine with disturbing news. I've been informed that several members of the FAA's Oversight Committee are questioning my direct involvement in this case. They're suggesting I should recuse myself due to my daughter's similar experience creating a potential bias. Mitchell mentioned something like that might happen, Jasmine told him, explaining the CEO's call. Harris's voice hardened. Did he now? That's extremely concerning. Using industry connections to attempt to influence an investigation could violate several federal statutes. Despite the pressure, Harris refused to back down. He proceeded with his planned trip to Atlanta, though he acknowledged the investigation might face procedural challenges. This is now about more than one incident, he told Jasmine. If airline executives believe they can manipulate regulatory processes with impunity, that represents a serious breakdown in our oversight system. As news of the developing investigation spread through industry channels, Bethany Wilson was placed on administrative leave, a move Horizon characterized as standard procedure, rather than disciplinary action. In media interviews, Wilson defended her actions as maintaining service standards, and suggested the video had been selectively edited to create a false impression. The situation escalated further when Jasmine and Zara began receiving threatening messages from anonymous accounts, forcing them to temporarily relocate from Patricia's home to a hotel for safety. The threats were reported to local police and the FBI, adding another layer of investigation to the growing case. Director Harris now faced potential removal from his position, accused of overstepping authority and pursuing a personal agenda. The same industry influence that Mitchell had obliquely referenced was being mobilized against him. Yet Harris remained resolute, telling colleagues, if standing up against discrimination costs me my position, then the position isn't worth having. The battle had expanded far beyond a spilled drink on an airplane. It had become a test of whether powerful corporations could continue to evade accountability by exploiting regulatory relationships and intimidating those who dared to challenge them. For Jasmine, Zara, and their growing coalition of allies, the stakes couldn't have been higher. 3 months after Jasmine's initial call with Director Anthony Harris, the landscape had transformed dramatically. Harris had withstood the pressure to recuse himself, instead expanding the investigation to include improper attempts to influence regulatory proceedings. The preliminary findings, released to appropriate congressional committees, revealed that Horizon Airlines had violated multiple federal regulations in their handling of discrimination complaints. On a crisp Washington morning, Jasmine adjusted Zara's collar as they prepared to enter the Russell Senate office building. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. Zara nodded, her expression a mixture of nervousness and determination. "I keep thinking about what Grandma said, that her generation couldn't fight back, but we can." Inside, the hearing room was already packed with journalists, industry representatives, and civil rights advocates. The Senate Subcommittee on Aviation Safety and Consumer Protection had convened special hearings to address the issues raised by the FAA investigation, with Jasmine scheduled as the lead witness. As she took her seat at the witness table, Jasmine spotted Director Harris in the gallery, alongside Patricia, who had insisted on attending despite her health challenges. Rachel Cooper, now reinstated with back pay following whistleblower protection proceedings, sat nearby with several other Horizon employees who had come forward with their own testimonies. Senator Maria Lopez, the subcommittee chair, called the hearing to order. "Today we examine troubling allegations regarding discriminatory practices in the airline industry and potential regulatory capture that may have allowed such practices to continue unchecked. Our first witness is Ms. Jasmine Taylor, whose courage in coming forward has brought these issues to national attention. Jasmine's testimony was powerful in its straightforward presentation of events, from the initial incident with Bethany Wilson to the escalating corporate response and attempts to silence critics. When she concluded, Senator Lopez invited Zara to speak if she wished. Zara approached the microphone with quiet confidence that belied her 12 years. "I used to dream about being a pilot," she began. "After what happened on that flight, I was afraid to even get on a plane again. But my mom taught me that running away doesn't fix problems, standing up does. So I'm here to stand up, not just for myself, but for every kid who's ever been made to feel they don't belong somewhere because of how they look." There wasn't a dry eye in the room when Zara finished. Even the industry representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the human impact of discriminatory practices impossible to ignore in the face of a child's testimony. As the hearings continued over the next 2 days, more employees and passengers came forward with evidence. Terrence Williams presented the internal documents he had preserved, demonstrating that Horizon's leadership had explicitly trained customer service representatives to offer different compensation levels based on passengers' perceived status and likelihood of taking legal action, factors that correlated strongly with race and socioeconomic background. Most damning was the testimony from former Horizon executive Patricia Alvarez, who had resigned in protest months earlier but had been bound by confidentiality agreements until subpoenaed by the committee. Alvarez revealed that the airline maintained an unofficial, passenger profitability index that rated customers based on their historical spending, likelihood of premium purchases, and frequency of complaints. This index, while never explicitly mentioning race, served as a proxy for differential treatment. The message was clear, Alvarez testified. Some passengers were worth keeping happy, while others were considered expendable to the business model. The public reaction was swift and unequivocal. Horizon stock plummeted as major institutional investors began divesting, concerned about both ethical implications and potential liability. Several large corporate clients suspended their business travel contracts, citing commitments to diversity and inclusion that were incompatible with the revealed practices. Under mounting pressure, Horizon's board of directors held an emergency meeting. David Mitchell, the CEO who had attempted to threaten and bribe his way out of accountability, was terminated along with several other executives. Bethany Wilson, who had become the public face of the scandal, was similarly dismissed, though she continued to deny any racial motivation behind her actions. The most significant outcome, however, came from the regulatory side. The FAA, in coordination with the Department of Transportation, announced comprehensive new requirements for airlines to document and address discrimination complaints. Random testing using paired testers of different racial backgrounds would be implemented to ensure equal treatment, with serious penalties for non-compliance. Industry-wide, airlines began reviewing their own policies and practices, recognizing that Horizon's fate could easily befall them if similar patterns existed within their organizations. The Flight Attendants Union, led in part by James Wilson and Rachel Cooper, pushed for improved training and clear procedures for reporting problematic behavior by colleagues or passengers. 1 year after the fateful flight that had changed their lives, Jasmine and Zara Taylor prepared to board another plane. This time, they were traveling to Washington for the launch of the Transportation Equity Foundation, an organization Jasmine had established using a portion of the settlement she had eventually accepted from Horizon, an amount far larger than the $50,000 initially offered, with no confidentiality restrictions. The foundation would provide resources and advocacy for victims of discrimination in all forms of transportation, from airlines to ride-sharing services. It would also offer educational programs for transportation providers and fund research into systemic inequities in access and treatment. As they settled into their seats, a flight attendant approached with a warm smile. "Miss Taylor, it's an honor to have you on board. Your work has changed our industry for the better." Zara, now 13 and considering a future in aviation law rather than piloting, looked up from her book about famous civil rights cases. "Mom, remember when you said one voice could start a chorus? I think we're hearing it now." Jasmine squeezed her daughter's hand, reflecting on their journey. What had begun as a moment of humiliation had transformed into a movement for accountability and change. Director Harris, who had successfully defended his position and expanded his agency's commitment to equity issues, had become a close ally and advisory board member for the foundation. Rachel Cooper had been promoted to a newly created position overseeing inclusion training for the restructured Horizon Airlines. Terrence Williams now led diversity initiatives at a competing carrier, implementing the lessons learned from Horizon's failures. And Dr. Peterson continued to speak out about the importance of being an active witness rather than a passive bystander when injustice occurs. As their flight took off, carrying them toward new possibilities, Jasmine thought about her mother's words about different generations facing the same battles in different forms. The fight was far from over, but meaningful change had taken flight, propelled by the courage of a 12-year-old girl who refused to accept that she didn't belong and a mother who wouldn't let injustice stand unchallenged. Have you ever stood up against injustice when it would have been easier to stay silent? I'd love to hear your stories of courage in the comments below. If you found Jasmine and Zara's journey inspiring, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories about ordinary people creating extraordinary change. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept the unacceptable. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may we all find the courage to speak truth to power when the moment calls for it. Until next time, keep standing up for what's right. This powerful story reminds us that sometimes the most important battles start with a single moment of injustice. Jasmine and Zara's journey shows that standing up against discrimination requires courage, persistence, and strategic allies. When faced with systemic racism, individuals often encounter powerful resistance designed to silence them, from financial bribes to character assassination. The corporate response illustrates how institutions protect discriminatory practices through denial, deflection, and intimidation. Yet Jasmine's determination demonstrates that one person with evidence and conviction can challenge even powerful corporations. Most importantly, this story teaches us about intergenerational strength. As Patricia noted, earlier generations couldn't fight back in the same ways, but they passed down their resilience. The breakthrough came not just from legal action, but from building a community of allies and witnesses like Dr. Peterson, Rachel Cooper, and Director Harris. Real change happens when we refuse to accept injustice as normal and persist despite obstacles. Zara's transformation from victim to advocate represents hope for a future where accountability replaces complacency in the fight against discrimination. Has someone ever stood up for you when you faced unfair treatment? Or have you been the one to speak up when witnessing injustice? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might inspire others to find their voice. If this account of courage against discrimination moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more powerful stories of ordinary people creating extraordinary change. Don't forget to share this with someone who needs a reminder that standing up against racism matters, even when it seems impossible. Thank you for being part of this community that believes in justice and equality. Together, we can make a difference, one story at a time.